Sometimes the people you let closest into your life turn out to be the very ones who carve the deepest wounds. My name is Vera, and this is not some made-up tale. This is my life, my pain, my heartbreak, and the revenge I never thought I was capable of. Before I take you on this journey, let me tell you, if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted more than family, this story is going to hit home. And if you've ever wondered whether karma is real, well, stick around until the end. You won't be disappointed. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever had a friend you thought of as a sister? Someone you trusted so deeply that you never thought twice before opening your heart to them? That was Lindsay for me. At least, I thought she was. We met in high school in a small town in Ohio. Lindsay was one of those people who seemed magnetic. She had a smile that could light up a room and a laugh that made everyone want to be near her. I was quieter, more reserved, but somehow we clicked instantly. She told me her secrets, I told her mine, and before long, people joked we were attached at the hip. We spent summers at each other's houses. We double-dated. We even made plans to move out to the city together after graduation. I used to thank God every night for blessing me with a friend like her. Back then, I couldn't imagine my life without Lindsay. But looking back now, I realized there were always cracks in the foundation, little things I brushed off, telling myself it was just my imagination. Like how she'd jokingly flirt with the boys I liked. Or how she always had to one-up me. If I got an A on a test, she somehow just happened to get an A+. If I bought a new dress, she'd show up the next week with something more expensive. I laughed it off. That's just Lindsay, I told myself. She's competitive, but she loves me. Years went by, and our friendship only deepened. We went to college in different states, but talked on the phone almost every day. When my father passed away suddenly during my sophomore year, Lindsay was the one who drove 6 hours in the middle of the night just to be by my side. She held me as I cried, and in that moment, I felt so grateful to have her in my life. But what I didn't see then was that Lindsay's loyalty came with conditions. Conditions I didn't even realize I was paying. Fast forward a few years. I was in my late 20s, working as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm in Chicago. Life was finally stabilizing. I had my own apartment, a job I enjoyed, and most importantly, I had met someone. His name was Daniel. Daniel was kind, patient, and had the sort of quiet strength that made me feel safe. From the very beginning, he treated me like I mattered. And after years of dating men who made me feel like I wasn't enough, Daniel was everything I didn't even know I needed. Naturally, I told Lindsay about him. She squealed with excitement, demanded to see pictures, and when she finally met him, she hugged me afterward and whispered, "Girl, he's perfect for you." I believed her. But that was the beginning of the storm. At first, it was little comments. "He's nice, but don't you think he's a bit boring?" Or, "Are you sure he's ambitious enough for you?" I laughed it off, told her she was just being protective. Then came the subtle digs when we were out with friends. "Daniel's great and all, but Vera always did have a thing for safe guys," she'd say with a smirk, as if she knew something everyone else didn't. I tried to ignore it. Daniel didn't deserve drama, and Lindsay had always been dramatic. But deep down, it bothered me. Still, I pushed it aside because Lindsay was my best friend. And best friends don't mean harm, right? What I didn't know then was that Lindsay had started weaving threads of poison, threads that would eventually strangle everything I held dear. As the months went on, Daniel and I grew closer. He was the kind of man who remembered the little things, my favorite coffee order, the exact way I liked my blanket tucked in when I fell asleep on the couch. He made me laugh when I was stressed and held me when I cried. Slowly, I began to believe in forever with him. But Lindsay wasn't happy. She called me more often, sometimes late at night, sounding tipsy or lonely. She complained about her own dating life, how she always ended up with losers who didn't measure up. Then she'd circle back to Daniel, saying things like, "Well, maybe you're just settling because you're scared of ending up alone." I should have seen it for what it was, jealousy. But I didn't want to believe my best friend could resent me. The first real crack came one night when Daniel and I invited her over for dinner. I had spent hours cooking a roast chicken, vegetables, even homemade pie. We sat around the table, laughing, drinking sparkling water, and for a moment, it felt perfect. Until I went into the kitchen to grab dessert. When I came back, Lindsay was leaning across the table, her hand brushing Daniel's arm as she whispered something that made him chuckle. I froze. The way she looked at him, the tilt of her head, the soft bite of her lip. It wasn't friendly. It was flirtation. I brushed it off with a laugh, telling myself I was overreacting. But in the pit of my stomach, unease took root. Over the next few weeks, it happened more and more. Little touches. Lingering stares. Once, I even caught her sending him a late-night meme directly, not in our group chat, but to him alone. I confronted her gently. Hey, Lynn, I noticed you've been kind of flirty with Daniel. Everything okay? She gasped dramatically, put her hand over her heart, and said, Oh my God, Vera, you think I'd try to steal your boyfriend? Please. He's cute, sure, but he's so not my type. You're paranoid. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. She was my best friend. But the doubt never went away. Then came the night that shattered me. It was a Saturday. Daniel had told me he was going out with a few coworkers for drinks, and Lindsay had invited me to a girls' night at her apartment. I was tired from work and decided to skip, telling her I just wanted to stay in with a book. She teased me for being grandma-ish, but said she understood. Around midnight, something nudged me awake. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was fate. I reached for my phone and froze. There, on my screen, was a picture sent by a friend of mine who happened to be at the same bar as Daniel. The photo showed Daniel at the corner booth. And next to him, with her hand on his thigh, was Lindsay. My heart stopped. I stared at that picture until my eyes blurred with tears. I wanted to believe it was innocent, but the image told a different story. The closeness, the intimacy, the betrayal written all over it. I didn't confront them that night. Instead, I sat in the dark, shaking, my mind racing through every memory, every laugh, every secret I had ever shared with Lindsay. Had it all been a lie? The next morning, I called Daniel. My voice was calm, but inside, I was trembling. How was your night? I asked. He hesitated, just a beat too long. Good. Just drinks with the team. That's when I knew. He was lying. And if Daniel was lying, it meant Lindsay had been lying too. That was the moment the old Vera died. The trusting, naive Vera who believed loyalty meant something. And in her place, a new Vera was born, a woman who would not just sit back and let betrayal destroy her. I decided right then that if they thought they could play me for a fool, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. Because I wasn't going to cry about this forever. I was going to burn everything they built together to the ground. The first thing I did was gather evidence. Not in a vengeful, reckless way. I was methodical. I needed facts, timestamps, messages, anything that proved Lindsay's intentions and Daniel's complicity. I checked her social media, her messages, the apps she used. I even casually bumped into her at the coffee shop she frequented, pretending to be friendly while observing her habits. Every smile, every tilt of the head, every seemingly innocent laugh became a puzzle piece in my plan. Meanwhile, I maintained the illusion of calm. At work, I was focused. I threw myself into my fashion label like never before, staying late, sketching, managing employees, securing new clients. My outward life was seamless. No one suspected the storm brewing in my personal life. And then I confronted Daniel. I invited him for coffee at a small cafe near the South End. He arrived, nervous, as if he knew what was coming. I looked him straight in the eyes. I saw the photo, I said softly. He swallowed hard. Vera, I held up my hand. Don't lie to me. Just tell me the truth. Everything. The admission was like a punch to the gut. He confessed. The drinks, the late-night texts, the stolen moments. He wasn't proud. He wasn't boasting. He just didn't want to hurt Lindsay. He said he felt trapped by her persistence, by her manipulations, by the guilt she knew how to induce. I listened quietly. My throat burned, but I didn't cry. I didn't yell. Instead, I smiled, cold and measured. You should have spoken up for me, I said. He looked down, ashamed. I know. And that was my opening. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I started quietly dismantling their little world. First, I set boundaries. I blocked Lindsay's access to my social circles, subtly cutting her off from networking opportunities she always relied on. I reached out to mutual friends, casually planting seeds of caution about her manipulative tendencies. Nothing overt, just enough to create subtle distance. Next, I attacked the logistics. I knew where she shopped, where she banked, even the apartment she rented temporarily when she visited Boston. I canceled appointments she had made through shared contacts, rerouted deliveries, and made her life just slightly more complicated every single day. Not enough to notice immediately, but enough to create tiny cracks in her confidence. All the while, I stayed in control of my own life. I was careful not to let anger dictate me. Anger is loud. Revenge is quiet, precise, almost invisible until it's too late to stop. And then I turned to the final piece, Daniel. I wasn't doing this just for myself. I wanted him to understand the weight of trust, to feel the emptiness left by betrayal. I gave him space, made him confront the consequences of his choices. He realized quickly that loyalty isn't just about love, it's about courage. Meanwhile, Lindsay grew restless. She started showing cracks in public, slipping up around friends. I let them happen. A forgotten lunch, a misdirected message, a personal secret spilled accidentally. I never intervened. I let her spiral on her own mistakes compounding day by day. The culmination came quietly. A crucial project at her temporary work fell through because of her overconfidence. She blamed everyone but herself. I observed from a distance, sipping coffee, watching her frustration mount. Her world was unraveling, stitch by stitch, all because I refused to react emotionally. I let reality do the work for me. By the time I decided to strike the final blow, the stage was set. Lindsay had overextended herself, alienated her friends, and even Daniel was distant. My revenge wouldn't be public humiliation. It wouldn't be a dramatic confrontation. It would be something far more powerful, a total, undeniable reclaiming of my life, and forcing her to witness her failure in slow, calculated agony. I began with the apartment. I knew she had been scheming to settle in, to take control of my sanctuary. But I had a legal edge, the lease, the terms, the agreements. Quietly, methodically, I ensured every piece of evidence was documented. I liaised with the building manager under the guise of routine checks, subtly reinforcing my ownership without alerting Lindsay. Then came the final countdown. I gave her enough rope to hang herself, letting her finalize plans, invest emotionally, and believe she was in control. By the time I made the final call to terminate the lease and reclaim my space, her shock was absolute. It wasn't rage she felt. It wasn't embarrassment. It was the sheer disbelief of being outmaneuvered by someone she had underestimated completely. And that was sweet justice. Lindsay didn't know what hit her. She strutted into my apartment that morning, expecting to see me scrambling, panicked, begging for some compromise. What she found instead was emptiness. Not a single personal item remained, except for a neatly folded note on the coffee table. You had your chance. Enjoy your new reality. She froze. Her eyes darted around the apartment, the space she thought she'd conquered, and she realized everything she assumed she could manipulate had slipped through her fingers. The calls started immediately. Lindsay's voice was sharp, panicked, desperate. She called building management, she called Daniel, she even called her parents. But every avenue she tried was blocked. Every attempt at leverage failed. I had planned every step meticulously, and she was discovering, painfully, that manipulation only works when the other side plays by your rules. Meanwhile, Daniel began to see clearly. Watching Lindsay flounder, he understood the weight of his earlier choices. For the first time in months, he reached out to me, not for forgiveness, not yet, but for guidance. He wanted to make amends, and he wanted to grow. I agreed, cautiously, allowing him a chance to prove himself. The parents? They were blindsided. Lindsay had painted a picture of a smooth transition, of her helping Daniel and me, of creating family harmony. In reality, all of her energy, went into controlling what she couldn't have. By the time they understood, it was too late. Her illusions had collapsed. I took my time. I didn't rush back to the apartment, didn't return to the space I had once called home. I let Lindsay overstay her welcome, let her struggle with rent, utility bills, and the expectations she had set. I let her make every misstep on her own. Word of her failures spread quietly. Neighbors whispered about the chaos she'd caused, about the sudden disappearance of her social media bravado. Even Daniel noticed the small victories I had engineered without direct confrontation, the tiny, calculated collapses that left Lindsay exhausted, frustrated, and isolated. And then came Jason. I met him in the backyard of my parents' house, where he had been staying quietly, humbly, reflecting on his mistakes. The man I had loved, the man I had believed in, was still there, still kind, but changed. He had faced his failures, and he was ready to rebuild. We started slowly. Dinners on the porch, shared coffees, long walks in the early morning mist. No expectations, no pressure. Just presence. Just understanding. We spoke about accountability, about trust, about the ways we had failed each other, and how we would prevent it in the future. He learned humility. He learned the value of speaking up. And in doing so, he reclaimed his dignity. Not because I forgave him immediately, but because he proved he could stand on his own, that he could honor the life we had built together.